Kia ora. We'll just go. Welcome back, everyone. We're just working on some minor additions around the legal review, and also one based on policy 2 to review every 3 years to try and get more people feeling a bit more confident about that. We'll also go back to the presentation, those examples. I think Carol's going to take us, or Louise is just going to take us through some examples of what the policy is now and what it, I know we've discussed this in previous workshops and things, but we're just going to refresh again on what it means within budget, of course. But yeah, Carol. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've got 4 examples on slides. I'll go through a couple.
Just want to bring the mic a bit closer to you, sorry.
Of course. So I'll go through a couple of examples. I've got 4 on the slides, but maybe we'll go through 2, and then if you want more information, then we can go through more, but it's quite detailed information, obviously. So as I mentioned, we went through a process where we developed 12 options, and at the end, we packaged those options, and we came up with package 1 and package 2. And so those examples here, they show how the current policy applies and how option 1 and option 2 would apply. And noting that option 2 is the option that we are recommending. So here is the example of Papakura. It's obviously a brownfield example. It's a metropolitan center, and there's already a substantial open space network, as you can see with the darker green. And obviously the icons on the maps are not scaled to size, so they're just there as representation. So under and those are showed as square in lighter green. Yes, and so that would cost an additional $15.5 million for acquisition and development. Papakura has got quite a substantial network, so you can see the capacity per meter square per capita at 30 years is 22.3. Noting that there's a lot of RMA changes, which could mean that Papakura develops in a way that we haven't anticipated, but that's probably more of a planning issue that we won't sort out today. So under option 2, we would acquire 6 parks. And so in addition to the 2 neighborhood parks, we would also acquire 4 pocket parks. And so that's the side map on the right-hand side. And so there would be additional costs, obviously. So another 15.4 million, and we would lift up the capacity to 22.6 meters square per capita from 22.3. And as you can see, so each pocket park would be 1,000 meters square. So that's an example of a brownfield that's got a good park network, but we could have additional provisions. So you have pocket parks acquired at cost to council that are close to where people live. Shall I take questions or shall I move to the next one?
Maybe if we just go through the examples and then we'll go to questions. There you go. Yeah.
Okay. This is an example of a greenfield area. If you're familiar with the unitary plan zoning, you can tell that most of that greenfield area will be developed as medium density. There's some parks that already been acquired, and they showed in red. So there's 3 parks already acquired. And as the area develops further, we would buy 19 parks in total. and that would bring the capacity to 16.6. If we look at better delivering, we would also acquire three pocket parks, sorry. So in addition, so PP is pocket parks, as you might have guessed, and so that would bring also better provision for the area, and we really would focus on providing pocket parks in those areas where there's high density, so the dark orange on the map. So Wesley, we've looked at, that's another brownfield area, and that's an area where, again, the capacity is medium, 13.2. There's already, under the current policy, we would acquire 2 new pocket parks in addition to the 2 existing. And under option 2, the proposed 2025 policy 2, we would acquire more pocket parks. So as you can see here, so we would, the current policy enables for 6,000 meters of open space acquisition, the new policy for 15,000 meters square. And the cost is an additional $23.9 million. Last example is Wainui, again, greenfield. And the difference between the current policy and the new policy is that, again, we would deliver a new pocket park in the high density areas in dark orange, part of that development for an additional $2.5 million.
Thank you. We've got a question from Councillor Walker. Councillor Walker.
I'm assuming that there's some underlying math behind this. So how have you arrived at the capacity in meters squared per capita?
Yes, so in Policy 2, there's a whole methodology which explains how we calculate capacity, but effectively we take into account open space that is usable by people. So open space in public ownership or with public access, like Cornwall Park. Part of Cornwall Park, for example, is not owned by council, but we can access it. And then we look at calculation at full build-out. We look at calculation, number of people at full build-out. So we take at 30 years, population at 30 years. And then we just do a division, and they give us a calculation. That's a short version of the methodology. There's quite a bit of detail, but that's the methodology in a nutshell.
And just to add to that, we've got page 55 outlines how those capacity calculations were arrived at. It has further detail there.
Okay, can you go back to the brownfield slide?
Sorry?
Can you go back to the brownfield slides? One of the brownfield slides. This is greenfield. So I just want to ask a question around reality. So if we accept that there are 2 funding mechanisms, one is development contributions from the extra capacity that's being provided. The second is rates. Given that we have a problem in that you've already got existing people in the area, and there will be an argument, and it's a well-known argument, that some of the acquisition will be for the existing population, and you can't raise development contributions from that. What follows is that the balance has to be funded by way of debt. Now, what we've found in reality, and I just want some clarification on this, is that we actually have not been even applying development contributions in many instances, or debt, because we've been in our debt ceiling. So how does this pragmatically work in future, because that's how it's been working recently, in the sense that we've not been acquiring reserves in brownfield areas, because one, it's too expensive, so you don't see us taking out houses and bowling them and putting in reserves in the meantime, and we can't afford it because of our debt ceiling. So how does this relate to our actual situation on council?
So I think I would like to take a step back and reflect on what is in front of you today for adoption, because we're not going to solve every single council problem here at this table this afternoon. This is a policy that sets standards for how much we expect to provide and standards for how we're going to acquire that land. There is lots of work that the finance team does about setting budgets, debt ceiling, all of our financial policies, which I have some understanding, but I'm probably not the best person to provide you advice on. So if we step back, I understand the concern that the budgets have been constrained, and so we have had limited ability to deliver on council expectation for how much open space we provide for our communities. That is well understood. But this is not the question in front of you today. The question in front of you is, are you sufficiently comfortable that we have done a thorough job and that the provision standard that we are proposing would deliver good outcomes for communities and that they are affordable and achievable? Or do you want us to go back to the drawing board and deliver higher level of open space provision, noting that then you will have to put more money? Or do you want us to do a lower level of provision to meet existing budgets in the LTP? Those are the questions in front of you today. There's a whole financial discussion that needs to happen after that.
My question concerns the financing, and my question is this going to be a significant unfunded mandate? That is, we're putting something up that has very significant financial implications across the region, and I'm just looking for the financial implications, because it says the strategy will be implemented using available budgets set during long-term plan annual plan processes. Now, that's incredibly vague, given the magnitude of what we're talking about. So I have a real concern that
Councillor Walker,
we're
this has
not
been
being adequately
this has
informed.
been explained. This is not the budget committee. This is not the finance committee. This is not the acquisition committee. This is a policy that directs A, the current budget we've allocated through the long-term plan, or B, the budget we may allocate in the next long-term plan.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the question that I'm asking the officers is this funded? Is it in the long-term plan? Is it actually capable of being mandated in a future long-term plan? And that's not to say that I'm not supportive of more areas for reserve. I'm looking at financial implications, and I really don't see any adequacy of information there around something that is potentially of the order of many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Thank you. If the officers are able to answer that,
Yep.
fine.
Through the chair. So we're in exactly the same position today as we were yesterday, or tomorrow if you pass this, is that at the moment there is an LTP budget for open space acquisitions, and there are also development contributions that we can take for open space. So those are our two big revenue opportunities to pay for open space. I don't think at any point in time, whether in Auckland Council or any of the previous councils, has this stuff ever been fully funded. And so what we do is we use the budget that we have each year and we try to apply this policy, and then there's a matter of, so what are we going to buy when? So there's the implementation. So it's funded in the sense that there is an LTP budget and there are development contributions. There has been no LTP budget that I'm aware of that's ever fully funded it, because of course this could be 30-year plus plan, so we don't have to fund out 30 years, but it is dependent on however much money we have at any particular point in time.
This, that's, I guess I'm going to ask you another question, Megan. Councillor Walker, this happens at every single, I remember the children and youth, the policy, other policies. This is the policy and planning committee. We set a policy and then it is up to us all to then either fund it, underfund it, overfund it. Could you just talk about how the policies within council work and why we're trying to reduce from the current 5 policies that are technically all unfunded to this one?
Yeah, so look, we are trying to provide you better information around, the financial implications of everything we do, whatever that is, whether it's the policy stage or even the implementation and delivery stage. Policies, though, always set a direction. They are not always and can never usually always look at the all of the financial implications. They can give a sense of it. Sometimes it's exactly clear, but often it's not. So we try and provide that to you, and then you have an option through the LTP to then fund the implementation of this and prioritise and weight which particular areas or policies or things that are important to the city at a particular point in time you would weight and you would budget and fund those more than you would other things. And that can change over time. Remembering this, we look out 20, 30 years on this. So it is an LTP conversation ultimately, and we've got development contributions too, which will continue to roll through, and we'll keep using that money as well, regardless of whatever comes through the LTP. But it is insufficient when we're looking over a 30-year period. We do not have billions of dollars just sitting in a pot, just waiting to be funded. But over time, that may well occur. That will just phase through.
And
It'll be phased. It won't be sitting there in one pot.
And how does something like the Nathan Land at Botanic Gardens that we all supported, how does a decision like that, which is outside the current policy and outside the budget, how did that come back to us? Like, how do those things that are unique, they come back in what form?
So that does come back as a kind of an unbudgeted request, so it's entirely unfunded and unbudgeted. And so that comes through to the relevant committee, and then you make a decision to either reprioritise, so use existing budget in a different way to pay for that thing, or it could be debt funded. You could choose to debt fund these things. Or in some other way set up the ability to fund it, but it normally means that something else then gets dropped off the list.
Thank you. I've got 3 more questions and then we better move to debate. So, Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. It's interesting. I've felt like before we had people asking questions that they didn't feel that it allowed for enough open space, and now I'm hearing questions that it is going to cost too much to even do this. So I'm trying to get both those things straight in my head. So can I just clarify and it's great you've still got the Wesley slide up. So if we don't vote through policy 2 today, then the future that will apply is the one on the left. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a current policy.
Right. So this is kind of a question. That clearly has less open space in it than the one on the right.
That's correct.
Yes. Okay. So policy 2 delivers the one on the right if we vote for policy 2.
And just to add to that,
Yeah.
the addition of pocket parks to better meet the needs for open space and higher density is really the differentiating factor here.
Yeah.
And that is in part of looking at this policy for the future needs of Auckland.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess you mentioned Northcote before. I guess Stonefields and perhaps Hobsonville Point might be other examples of spaces that have quite a, sort of a network of pocket parks and neighbourhood parks and sports parks in this kind of fashion. Are there any other suburbs you could point to for people to get that mental picture?
We have provided a list of examples of different type of parks, so we can send that again. I don't have that in mind. What's interesting also in Northcote's development is this private open space provision.
Yeah.
So when we look at large-scale development, it's not just public open space, because as you can see, it's very expensive, but private developers have got the ability also to to provide a communal space for their residences.
Yeah, there's sometimes can be some issues with that in another part of Wesley that's just over the boundary. But anyway, I'll leave that. So the point here, there's questions about if we don't have enough money to deliver policy 2, and if we don't have enough money to deliver policy 2, we definitely don't have enough money to deliver 20 metres square. If we don't have enough money, then part of the point of the policy and the strategy is to help us to prioritise how we do spend the money we have. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
And also, at the moment, with the 5 policies and strategies, as Carol noted earlier in the presentation, that does provide some confusion. So we are, even though this is quite complicated, we are looking to provide better guidance and clearer guidance.
So is it fair to say then that this, if we adopt this today, including policy 2, we will have settings that provide more certainty for decision makers and encourage them to include more open space in future plan changes?
That's correct as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Chair, Councillor Dalton.
And my question was answered through your questions to Megan. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'm doing a Julie actually. I just want to get some clarification. So basically the policy is really high level, and that is when the existing policy was first signed off, we didn't have the level of intensification that we're having now or will have in the next 30 years, correct?
That's correct.
And then you're also saying that as we move forward and have more intensification, the importance of open space is important, correct?
Correct.
And although the policy is very high level and has more open space, the actual decision about where and when and how much will be done year by year as part of annual plan or LTP, correct?
So the where and when will be through
Not the where. sorry.
planning work, and then you get an acquisition pipeline, but then there'll be a decision from the governing body about prioritization against budget.
Yeah, my question was incorrect. Your answer was correct. So even though it's high level and it has great aspirations, at the end of the day, the political decision will be based on prioritisation every budgetary cycle, correct?
Every 3 years, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering if you could go back to the Papakura map, please. The slide, it was a bit before that one there. So, I mean, you could have all the, I'm a bit torn about this because I like option 2, but there is an important point here. Coming back to how this is funded, because we could all say, well, we've got a strategy and we've done amazing work because we've got the strategy and we've got all this open space. Coming back to how this lands, all of the pocket parks that are identified in option 1 and option 2 all relate to growth, don't they? Not one of those pocket parks really could be justified as a necessary change in the level of service in the network. Is that correct?
In this example, it's driven by growth because, as you can see, you've got quite a good open space network. But if you had another area where there was under provision, there's no reason why you could not develop a pocket park to better meet the needs of the community. Obviously, it's not development contribution funded because it's not growth related.
I understand that. We don't tend to develop new parks because we're changing the level of service. We tend to develop new parks for growth. Okay, so the missing issue here is that the development contributions policy requires us to identify each growth related project for which we will require contributions, and we must demonstrate the method around that to reflect that the contribution is required to fund this particular growth project or this particular acquisition because of growth, and the benefits received will be primarily enjoyed by those who are coming here as a consequence of growth, and therefore we can identify that in the schedule of the policy, correct?
Yes, so my team does that work. So we just look at the
Yeah.
30-year pipeline to
Yeah.
inform the
Sure.
long-term plan, and that's the first client, if you want. And then
Yeah.
the beneficiary analysis is secondary consideration.
Okay. So we adopt this today is what happens then? Is an officer going to phone up Andrew Duncan and the contributions team and say, look, we've adopted the policy. This is what the policy says. This is the method for the policy. This is the kind of yield of land that we will require. This is approximately where we will require it. We need to identify that in the policy now to require the schedule to be updated so that we can then levy the contributions from the developer. Is that the next step? Is that the conversation that happens once this policy is adopted?
There's a couple of steps before that. So it's which areas we want to implement the policy in. So there might just be some planning work first. Then we understand the 30 years pipeline and how much it costs. And then it's a development contribution conversation. But yes.
Just to be clear, because unless what I see on the screen then goes into a schedule in a development contributions policy, no developer is going to pay for this growth related infrastructure that we are mooting unless we require them to do so, which means that this must be identified in the policy. So how quickly can that happen? Because it can't happen for another five years or something. That's not going to work because the growth is occurring now, and you need to be able to tax the developers for their contribution. Otherwise, you'll never get it. And I'm very skeptical about being able to fund this entirely through debt. I certainly would like to see it all funded, but I'd like the contribution to pay for it. Otherwise, it's going to be a very hard sell.
Okay, noted. I think we can speak to the development contribution team to see when the next policy is due. But I know the current policy is coming to this committee or this council at the end of the month.
Okay, I want to understand. We should. This ought to be updated every year now if this is what we're going to do, because we've got to try and get the best part of $30 million more in development contributions just for these pocket parks in Papakura. And if they're not in the DC policy, it makes this policy discussion, this debate, a bit academic. So I'd like a little bit more information about that. But look, thank you very much, Chair. Is it my right to speak?
And Councillor Newman, Carole and the team have been working closely with the DC team right from the beginning on the development of this. So they are aware of it, and we will continue working closely with them.
Chair, can I just say one more thing, one more question? Yeah. The quandary that I have here is that I have asked the DC's team to explain what are the new projects that we've got coming up to get into the policy, and they've been a bit vague on this. So is this the big reveal, or is this still a theoretical document? I'm really a little unclear about this. I like to see progress, but it's the implementation of this, because Kāinga Ora will not willingly pay over the best chunk of $30 million unless they absolutely have to. So that's what I want to see the policy updated.
Yeah, it's
Any comment from
possibly from myself or Megan, but that is why I did add with Councillor Alf's agreement those additional items. I've just asked Megan if we could add into F the next annual plan and long-term plan. So then at least, so the runway is the runway. If the runway starts today or it starts next year, that's when it starts. But if we are able to put annual plan in there, then it would maybe start, because what you're saying, Councillor Newman, as far as I understand how this rolls out, obviously more and more can be prioritised because Andrew Duncan made it clear when I think Councillor Walker asked a question about reserve contributions, is that we still need to put in our portion to then attract the DCs. So it is both. Both need to be jumping in the runway for those acquisitions.
Chair, respectfully, that's why I asked the officers if this is a growth-related investment, or if this is a change in the level of service. Obviously, rates funds the consequential operating cost of that, but these are explained as growth, and growth therefore ought to be taxed via contributions, which needs to happen now. Reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Just clarification of a couple of the terminology that's now being used in respect of the medium density. Medium density is the old mixed housing urban. Is that correct? Mixed housing urban?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's medium density is mixed housing urban. Yeah, so previously the most popular form of zoning, and that was just going back to the unitary plan, of course, was mixed housing suburban. So we've had a monumental increase in intensity and density. So medium suggests that it's medium. It's not actually. It's actually on the higher level of things.
What definitions have you used, Carol? Is it both
Medium
MHS and
density.
MHU? Or?
So we're using the definition in the unitary plan.
Medium density. So what's happened to mixed housing, urban and suburban then? That was in the unitary plan.
So it's on page 53 of our strategy. I won't comment really on the unitary plan zone before and after, but we've aligned our zoning with what's in the unitary plan.
Well, that terminology hasn't been changed since 2016, has it?
Not until we approve Plan Change 78 or something else.
So
Just to clarify, I've got my staff online just giving me information. Mixed housing, urban and suburban are medium density.
okay, so the simple point making there is mixed housing, urban at that stage, and we're under less than a decade ago, was quite a high level of density. So bear that in mind when we're talking about the provision here. And the other point I just would like clarified, and I'll speak to it in the debate, is that, and I think Councillor Newman were getting to it, as far as the greenfield sites and everything go, because there's a lot of concern getting put up about costs and stuff, but very simply, if we're identifying the provision that we require in advance, there is the developers picking up the tab for that, isn't it? In its entirety, both for acquisition and for development, the two components to put something on open space.
Only the growth-related part of the investment.
Yeah.
So
if it's a greenfield, that's all growth, isn't it?
It's a high proportion of growth, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thanks, Chair. I'm utterly supportive of having that level of prescription to leverage with developers around those minimum standards, but I'm less persuaded about where we're going with some of the other dimensions to the policy. So basically, for the brownfield stuff, I totally am on board, and I think that there is a relatively clear pathway there. Is there a possibility we could split some of this work for further work and get locked in some of the brownfield issues today? I still have this feeling that not everybody fully understands just how comprehensive this will be. And the question that I have, I want to put to Carol, is if you go back to the formation of this council and for the first few years, there was a separate item for regional parks. There was a separate item within our budgets.
Here.
When did that change?
I'm sorry, I can't help you. I've only been here 5 years.
Yeah, I think it was around 2016 or so. But I've just got a real level of discomfort on the sub-regional and the regional stuff, but I understand entirely what you're trying to do with regards to the brownfield. And I suppose it's a question of the chair whether or not part of this work could be separated for adoption today and other work to be forthcoming.
I mean, I guess they're all intertwined. The issue would still be budget. As staff, since the question was to me, the staff have said that any regional park proposal would come just the same as it did under the last, and the new would be considered based on the attributes of that land that it becomes available, much like many of the parks we have. I guess what would the team think would change? I guess, how would regional parks work under the current policy or the future? Or is it just about us, as in all of us in the last number of budgets have obviously not put enough budget into regional parks, and that needs to be considered as part of those? So could you answer?
Well, Richard, before she answers that, there used to be a separate pool, and the pool enabled partnerships, joint ventures, philanthropy, plus, and that is how, for instance, if you look out at Aotea Great Barrier, we eventually got Glenfern off the ground. It was using a bit of creative modelling, but there was some seeding fund within it as a separate standalone item. What we don't now have, because it's all just been dumped into the pot, it's not going to provide any certainty for those who have a particular interest around sub-regional and regional parks.
Question for Carol, how would that work? Does the partnership, I think it was the area that I spoke with Councillor Baker's question, that would cover that, but it would still be down to us to supply this budget, right? And through budget rounds.
That's exactly right. Given the feedback we got during the development of the strategy, everything is enabled, be that partnerships, philanthropic, whatever. There's no hindrance to that in this policy. But I think the key issue that Councillor Fletcher is talking about is there either a dedicated pool or more funding to actually deliver on some of those regional and sub-regional park aspirations. As Carol has explained a number of times, this sets the standards, then we have the funding process that then delivers the ability to acquire.
Okay, and maybe I guess questions on this, delaying this, any part of this, will your advice change to us on any of these policies, apart from the budget, which we want to address, hopefully, United Way or the new council will propose new budgets. But if we delay any part of this, will any of the advice change? Because we've gone through 2 years of process to get here.
Yeah, that's correct. My feeling here is that we have done substantial work, and we have looked at greenfield and brownfield. We have looked at different sub-regional examples, applied, as I said, 12 different options and see what would happen. And just, in terms of optioneering, I can't see what else we would do apart from applying those options in more examples, but probably we've done enough examples that you would not get to different answers. I think the suggestion from Councillor Darby to look at it through a legal view will be useful. We have a policy that has more teeth, but in terms of the options, yes, I can't see what else we would do.
Okay.
And perhaps just
But further to the regional parks then, could you remind us of what the recommendations were within the regional park management plan, which was a very comprehensively dealt with document around having separate line items for regional parks?
No, I wasn't involved in the regional parks management plan, so I have little understanding of that. I think what I'm hearing is that you have a desire to have a separate budget line item to better enable regional parks development. At the moment, when an opportunity arises and the governing body decides to acquire the land, then the money needs to be found at the detriment of other priorities. So if you wanted to have a specific budget to enable regional parks acquisitions, and we're just speaking about regional parks, then that could be something that could be dealt with maybe through the budget committee. But obviously, this policy doesn't have the ability to set budget or budget lines.
No, I understand that, but I do also understand the amount of work that went into the regional park management plan, and we're going into this while ignoring another current document of council. So it just leaves me distinctly uncomfortable that we're not really, while I totally understand what you are trying to do, as I have repeated on brownfields, on the sub-regional, which might be a premier park or something of that nature, and for the regional parks, I think we might do them a disservice if we just leave it to the ad hocery of the will of the current crop of councillors on the day without any other coherent strategy underpinning it.
Councillor Fletcher, just a couple of points. I think some options were put up around regional parks, and as we've noted earlier, in response to feedback, we removed those so that there was less specificity. I think also just in terms of the points that Megan was making before, policy provides the direction. We then need to look at the funding process and the implementation. And there's different levels of the plans there. And definitely things like the Regional Parks Management Plan would be being considered when you're looking at that funding and also the implementation part of things. I suppose just also answering your earlier question about doing further work on a portion of this, on the regional and sub-regional bit. As Carola said, there has been very extensive analysis done by the team to this point in consultation with the working group and other, advice. If we were to do anything further, we would really need to be very specific about what those requirements are, because at this point to come up with different analysis, as I said, we've done a fairly solid basis of it to this point. Thank you.
Just to add in terms of the link between this strategy and the Regional Parks Management Plan. So if you look on page 50, the words are taken directly from the Regional Parks Management Plan, and we have worked with Scott Da Silvia to ensure that there was alignment. So the Regional Parks Management Plan has not been ignored by any means.
Thank you. Right, I think we have exhausted 4 hours of questions. So maybe, the Mayor. Apologies, Mayor would like some more questions.
Sorry to prolong the agony, but I found these little examples quite helpful. But considering that the first point of what we're doing is worrying about intensified high density areas where they have low and moderate levels of provision, I'm trying to imagine what's going to happen in Kingsland. Kingsland, as we all know, we're kind of been with the government and the railway lines, we're going to force intensification on an area which is already, compared to Papakura, pretty full. And the only park there that I'm aware of is Eden Park, which I don't think counts for this. So what does it look like in an area like that there? If we're going to intensify, do we have to buy a whole lot of these expensive homes and flatten them in order to give them an extra park or not? And we don't want to look like Gaza. So, what's the
Mayor,
answer?
I don't think the comparisons are helpful, please.
I'm sorry.
Actually, Councillor Watson, you and I attended a protest together on that, thank you.
Yeah, I don't,
I'll withdraw that full little
Yeah,
word,
thank you.
just carry on with just, I'm worried about, Kingsland's going to be a battleground for us anyhow, one way or another. And so what would it look like there? What does this do to Kingsland? Do we just ignore it and just intensify it and they have to get on the train and go to a park?
You're putting me on the spot here because it's really hard to just give you advice on an area I've got little understanding of. But obviously, that's, you would look at how many people would be living there over 30 years. You would just look at, what type of provision you would like to see on a map, and then see whether or not acquisitions are possible. And how much it would cost. So there would be quite a bit of work. So it's not, a magical answer. You have something in a policy and it happens. But if you wanted to better provide for people living in those high density areas alongside transport routes in metropolitan center, you'll have a few options. Acknowledging that, yes, you're right, it is expensive and it is difficult because those areas are highly built up already, and so the opportunities to acquire land is few and far between.
Well, you did choose Wainui, which will benefit from a big wave park shortly, which will have more people going to it than anything that we go and buy. So, well, you have to pay to get at Eden Park too, and that's quite a well-known park. I didn't mean to be flippant here, but I am trying to understand what it does for very heavily intensified areas, because that's what we're talking about in item 1, which is what's at the top of the package, and it's what you drove the thing on, and we haven't got an example of it. And so I'm worried about it, Kingsland, from a number of reasons. And
Pardon? I guess
No,
the
well-
question and the problem is we're going down to minute areas. Could I just
This is
have
one.
Carol, what the current policy we live on today, if we just walk away from here and feel very depressed after all this, there is basically the purchase and the provision of new parks in current high density places is basically banned under our policy, right?
It's not ideal, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So the new policy recognises the new Auckland because everyone has been focused on the lack of green space when apartments are jumping up, and the whole switch, am I correct, is to try and get better provision over time. It's not compulsory, but we will try and purchase over time. We'll aim to provide green space in intensifying areas, like we're.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So one of the things is that it gives us better tools to try and address some of the challenges of the future. As Carol was saying with the Kingsland example, we'd need to look at that in detail, and obviously that's as the opportunity arises and as the, potentially where those opportunities are and whether they can be achieved. But it does give us better tools than our current policy to actually deal with those, future situations.
And the policy helps us as a group, this is the question, then decide, hopefully together, to set budgets, to set DCs, to set long-term plans, which we legally have to do, to enable DCs to kick in, to ask developers to pay, or as Councillor Baker said, partner with. They will then enable us to increase it by, maybe a couple $100 million over 10 years if we choose to, around this table, do that. But at the moment, we are totally hamstrung by our own policies and our own budget, unless we're willing to change it.
Yes, I think the key, the policy would better deliver for high density and for greenfield areas. To enable delivery would require more budget, but that's a question for another day. But it is where the roadblock is.
And the last question, just on the 20 square metres discussion from Albert Eden, and I know that's still a concern. If we stuck to that, we would be having to increase either DC policy or rates by like billions of dollars. Like, can you see us doing,
Depends how brave you are, I suppose.
cool. I mean, I'd love to do that, but I doubt we would be realistically able to do it. Okay, I'll get you to step back from the... Right. Can we just, the additions through discussion was following the review strategy by Council's legal services team, that came from Councillor Darby. Councillor Filipina and Dalton have said they're happy to have that in. Then I think there was the review down the bottom from Councillor Ferry. Was there down the bottom? Yeah, but then it was only, there'll be minor change and then approved by Councillor Dalton and I and Hokura. Then we've got F and G, which were the ones that I added Chairs Rex and Councillor Filipina said yes, which was around enabling all that work from this policy to increase our budgets, hopefully. We don't have to, I'm not saying we will, but I'm assuming from this conversation there's a potential to be a majority. Hopefully the new council would agree the same. And then E, which is agree that policy 2, the open space provision and acquisition, be reviewed in 3 years' time to evaluate its effectiveness. So are we purchasing enough? Are we having problems? As I think someone said, getting it in that intensified areas, and that would be reported to whatever committee under the next term. Right. Councillor Filipina would like to start, and he will, I know you're going to start by acknowledging the process as well.
Tēnā koe he mana, thank you, Chair. To the ladies who were first up there, ngā mihi kia koutou katoa, and those that lasted the over 4 hours, to you and to you, Korau, and to Louise, ngā mihi kia kōrua. Thank you so much for this. And also to the team. And Chair, I just want to make some acknowledgements because it's important that I do. And the first one is to the Joint Political Working Group. Matua Tony Kake was the original Haukura member, and then he had to leave, and so Whaia Hani Renata came on board. I want to acknowledge them both from Haukura as well as Heather Ruru from Haukura, who helped during this whole 2-year process. Also, I want to acknowledge the members and those that lasted the journey, but also those that ended up resigning. And I know, Councillor Fletcher, just want to acknowledge your input in regards to the Working Political Group, and I know that it would have been hard for you to resign. But I acknowledge the mahi and your input in regards to the works. Also to members Sandra Coney and to Margie Watson, who ended up the Deputy Chair of the Joint Political Working Group. Kataraina Maki, and now Louise again. She was there from the outset. And look, I wanted to acknowledge that group because 2 years is a hell of a long time, but that needed to happen because of the 5 policies that they had to bring together. Councillor Lee, I also just wanted to acknowledge ex-Councillor Coney and her input prior to the amalgamation. And the reason I do that is because she ended up putting a lot of topics in front of the staff and the joint political working group. We ended up working through quite a few of that. And our last meeting was on the 2nd of May. So, I just wanted to acknowledge her contribution prior to the amalgamation and obviously when she first came on with yourself and others in 2010. Look, I want to again acknowledge some of the other stuff. Ezra, Rachel, Dorothy, Cheryl, Helen, thank you so much for all the work that you have put into this. Chair, as I said, the 2nd of May was the last meeting of our working group. And the reason the 2nd of May was the last is because we were always going to the political working group and we wanted to make sure that they were at least comfortable, if not supportive, of this policy. And up until then, there were changes being made. So, gosh, 2nd of May, and then having that briefing with yourself, Louise, Koro, and with the Deputy Chair, Councillor Dalton, with both you and the Chair. It was just so important to have that meeting this week in regards to this. This work is, and you've seen it in the report, this work is a policy framework. It doesn't restrict us. There is still work to be done. We understand that. In regards to the additions, and I want to acknowledge you, Chair, for those additions and to let me know early that there were going to be your recommendations and agreed with both myself and Councillor Dalton. When I have a look at the policy itself and when we got sent the document, I think one of the key things for me is that I ended up talking with the staff when Councillor Lee ended up having his working group for the regional parks. One of the first things I asked the political working or the staff was to please contact Councillor Lee. Please contact him. He's now, and I told him to contact Councillor Lee and also the staff that deal with the regional parks because this is important. And I know they did reach out because around the Regional Parks Management Plan, which obviously went through the previous term under the PACE Committee. So look, Chair, I will be supporting this. I know based on the questions, the pātai and at times whakaaro comments, I think it's important that we look at it as a framework moving forward. To those that added to now what we have as substantive to you, Councillor Darby, and to you, Councillor Ferry. Look, the fact that we can incorporate that and the staff are supportive, I think goes a long way to amalgamating the 5 policies. So look, I leave that to now the colleagues around this table if they've got any whakaaro, but kia ora, Chair, again. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor Filipaina, for all your work.
Also, haukura, my humble apologies.
Councillor Newman.
Oh, look, Chair, I'm genuinely a little. I'll probably end up supporting this. I think there's a couple of gaps even now. Firstly, it's with respect to F and G. It's not the next annual plan, the long-term plan. It's the development contributions policy now that needs to be updated, and it needs to be updated because unless you schedule a project, you're not going to be able to charge the development contribution. And for brownfields, a lot of it, in fact, almost all of it, is going to be a growth project. It's going to be about a level of service that's required because of growth that's occurring. And the Mayor was right. The Mayor's asking the question about Kingsland. Apart from Eden Park, there's a couple of parks around there. Gribblehurst is down the road, but there is a need to have a transition to the development contributions policy. Otherwise, this becomes potentially, likely, in some places, an unfunded mandate. Secondly, I suspect that the regional parks network is not going to be something that can be easily funded through development contributions. That comes because of political imperative to make an investment. The issue of the Nathan Land has been raised. The Nathan Land has long been identified by members of the Friends, and a number of us have been associated with that. Spent time with Jack Hobbs and the Nathan family and the Friends, and we took the Mayor along, and the Mayor backed it, and that's how it was decided. There's not a lot of science behind it. It was just a once in a lifetime opportunity. Use it, or have towers at 120 Hill Road. So you can't policy your way to some things, but I do think that there is a gap there in that regional park space. I'm not quite sure how to deal with that. I do think that there is a need to have a degree of reality. This is a policy for us, but I have no. I strongly suspect that developers will seek to ignore this and seek to try and pass through plan changes that make no contribution towards achieving these outcomes. And they'll say largely it's because their projects are not really growth related. Now, I think they're wrong, but they will ignore it. So we have to be mindful of the fact that with the best will in the world, I don't think that this is going to be something that can be upheld from a planning perspective when you go through those plan changes, but we shall see. I'm looking forward to that advice. Chair, I'm not sure if you can make some consequential adjustments to reflect the points that are raised around the DCs and regional parks, but I do think that they need to be considered. Otherwise, possibly some of our colleagues might not be as comfortable as others. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor, and probably speaking outside of the debate, I've asked Megan if we can fit a mention to the DCs, but of course a long-term plan usually has to trigger that change. And on regional park, my assumption is that open space acquisitions is in there, but yep, we could always add regional park and open space acquisitions. Councillor Watson.
Thanks. I'm just reading our strategy on a page in the attachments there for our open spaces, sport and recreation opportunities benefit all Aucklanders now and for future generations. They support health of people, health of land, health of families, health of water, and contribute to a healthier Auckland. And I guess the perplexing thing for me has been that it's actually hard to get a handle on how things are really going, because as the Mayor quite rightly alluded to, there's a whole range of different provisions across Auckland that are a consequence of legacy councils, or the consequence of the ARC, and as a consequence of the way the super cities provisions are being provided for. The officers right at the outset made a remark about how important this is for the well-being of people generally, but particularly young people. And it's a very apt day to have heard that, because when I was driving into the council today, I'm on the Northwestern motorway, there was an item on this UNICEF report that just came out today. UNICEF report card for young persons' well-being, and in that report it revealed that New Zealand ranks 32 out of 36 wealthy countries for child well-being. New Zealand has the highest youth suicide rate among 36 countries, 3 times the average, and ranks last for child and youth mental health. And they went into an analysis, and one of the things that came up was open space, was access to open space, areas for people to go to. And the one thing that strikes me as I drive around my ward, but I know it's duplicated everywhere else, is these big swathes of mixed housing urban that just take over the landscape. They're probably all about $1 million. They're not cheap, but if you walk around them, there's not a lot of open space. So some of the places are quite generous, but when you look at that, often they're the result of legacy provision. So up in my area, Rodney provided a lot of the stuff around Millwater, which is very, very generous. If you compare Millwater to next door, Milldale, which is kind of a new suburb, but even bigger than Millwater, it's not nearly so generous. So I think what's been lacking in today's analysis, and it's not any fault of the presentation, because that's not been the emphasis, is just what's really happening in all the different parts of Auckland. So we've got a couple of the examples up there with the maps, but what strikes me is that if you're taking a bigger area, say like north of the bridge, you see the existing areas that didn't actually have much provided for them. So Birkdale Beach Haven, for instance, which is a lower socio-economic area, certainly was when our family was getting brought up. There wasn't too much provided by way of pocket parks or even sports fields in the immediate vicinities, but there were a lot of schools, and the schools were open to kids back then. So you go and that was accessible. They're not, and I notice in the strategy there's a reference to perhaps using schools. That's really not a goer for most schools, because in most instances they've got a big fence around them. You can't get in. They don't want people going in there. There's vandalism and all the rest of it. So that's not the solution it was once. But what was provided there by the council as a consequence of the provision regime back then was these big tracts of bush, rubbish land that developers didn't want, but it's still quite nice land. It had little streams and pockets of bush either side of it, and that now forms a lovely green belt that goes all through Birkdale, Beach Haven and Glenfield. Under the super city and under our model, I am a little concerned that if you be overly prescriptive, then you sometimes limit the opportunities, and you get these little patches of land that in a number of instances don't actually have anything on them. So if you go to some of the parts of Long Bay, which is pretty expensive real estate, there's a couple of big neighbourhood parks, I guess they are, but there's nothing on them, and they've been like that for years. They're not, no one's really going to do anything because they're not even flat. So a little bit of a rant, but I guess what I'm saying is what I support is more open space, full stop. More open space, because of those horrifying stats that apply to our country, and Auckland will be as much to the fore in that as anyone, and the importance of open space in addressing that. So, Mr. Chair, whatever gives us more open space is what I'm backing, whether it's regional parks, pocket parks, or anything else in between.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, and it's great to follow you, Councillor, because I agree with you. Look, this is a high-level strategy, right? It's a high-level, it's not an action plan. It's a high-level strategy which actually identifies that as a city, we are growing. Our intensification is something that we need to take on board, and we're going to do that quite significantly in the next little while. Open space is critical for areas of intensification. That is a scientific fact. From stormwater management to social benefits, feeling the sunshine, touching the grass, cooling the air temperatures by up to 4.5 degrees Celsius, mitigating the effects of urban heat island effects, and not to mention mental health. So I think anyone that doesn't support this is actually turning their back on the fact that we need open space for our people going forward with a high level of intensification. The issue that I have, and I'm sure others do too, is to what cost? How much is that going to cost to deliver it? All right. Now this policy doesn't have the costing associated with it, and when it does, it's astronomically high. But it doesn't mean you can't be aspirational in where you want to go to. So every annual plan, every LTP, we will come up with a figure. Now, I don't know what that figure is going to be. It could be a very large number, it could be a medium low number, and it could be a low number. But at the end of the day, why can't we aspire in a city that's growing and intensifying to have small areas and large areas of open space for the well-being of future Aucklanders? So I will support this. What will be interesting to see, though, is actually the dollars associated with this, both in our annual plan and in our LTP going forward, which is actually why I really am very interested in, and boy, I tell you what, this job is going to make me go to the Specsavers, is to number E, which is reviewing in 3 years. So it'll be very interesting to see when the aspiration is this, how we've got on in 3 years as to the level of intensification and the level of open space that is we have provided to support that. So I will give it my support, but as I said, high level, believe in it, the devil is in the financial backing to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just pausing for a second as we have a potential amendment. Hang on a second. We have an amendment from Councillor Lee. So I'll just get Councillor Lee, I'll just get you to speak to your amendment. It's being typed up. Do you have a seconder? Sorry, I didn't see. Councillor Turner would like to second it. It's being written up because you wrote.
Do you want me to speak to it now, Mr. Chair?
It's your
Essentially, the sticking point has been through the process, from what I can see, has been policy 2. I mean, there's been a lot of work gone into this, and I acknowledge that the officers and members of the working party and the Māori advisory people as well. So a lot of work has gone into it. It's obviously a comprehensive document and very ambitious, probably too much, too big and too broad. But nonetheless, in terms of policy 2, that has been the dividing point. I think the people who have dissented on this, the local boards and the members of the working party, have valid concerns that we need to respect. Now, reviewing it in 3 years' time, on the face of it, kind of acknowledges their concerns, but not really. By 3 years' time, who knows where we will be. In 3 years' time, the work that has been done and the memory and the detail would have been put on the back burner and will have to be started all over again. Better to continue the work now while it's fresh in the minds of both the officers and the working party and other interested parties, and get option 2 right. It shouldn't take too much to fix that, and bring it back before the end of this term. Don't kick it down the road. Let's deal with it now. It's not quite finished. Option 2 is a sticking point. We can review it and get it done properly. And I think then we'll get consensus, which I think is important. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Can I just have a point of clarification? Where does this amendment sit? Does it replace something in the original? Is it a new I? Where does it sit? It becomes a new A.
It's an amendment to E. So all after review is replaced by that it be reviewed in and reported back by September 2025. I don't have the bit of paper. It's gone up
Just going to scroll.
Somebody can help me.
Council. We're just
It's, in other words, don't talk about 3 years. That's ridiculous. 3 months is more like it. And we've got till September, which is a bit more, I think.
This is an amendment by. This is amendment by replacement for E, and we'll just scroll down to E.
I see. Thank you.
There's Councillor Lee's E, and then there the original E. Sorry.
So this committee.
So the original E was agreed that policy 2. No, this we'll just move to debate. I'm just reading the agreed that policy 2 open space acquisition be reviewed in 3 years to evaluate its effectiveness and outcomes for Auckland to be reported at the relevant committee. Councillor Lee will replace that with reviewed and reported back to Policy and Planning Committee September 2025.
Questions to staff?
Deputy Mayor.
So my question is to the mover, right? So my understanding is the whole purpose of this is to plan for intensification that is coming, right? We haven't got it yet, it's a 30-year window. And I'll get there, my question is, the original recommendation was 3 years because we don't know quite how fast that intensification will happen, right? So why are you trying to make this just 3 months, May, June, July, August, 4 months? Because you won't know how quickly that intensification is coming. So what is the purpose of...
I think this is a debating point. It's not a...
I'm just asking him the question. Yes, I want you to respond.
Well,
Thank you.
we're still working through, and I think the government is still working through its intensification scheme, which I don't think is particularly coherent, but let's not go there. We have a role and a duty going back decades to protect and acquire public open space at every level of local government. Some of the best parks we have were actually acquired and established in the 19th century. So this is not a new role. The argument you make about we need to see how the densification or intensification, whatever they call it, the new version of Plan Change 78 works out, is kind of beside the point. We have given Auckland's population and growing population, we have a role and an obligation to provide for public open space, and obviously we have an elaborate plan to how to go about doing it. All I'm saying is, rather than finishing it today, the section of the plan that is still causing division, if you like, of opinion, get it fixed in our current term and have the whole thing done by the end of this council's term.
Thank you, Councillor. A supplementary then to staff. We're not finalising it today, are we? We're setting a high-level strategy and the implementation plan will come later. Is that correct?
Yes. So this...
Councillor Ferry.
Yes, my question to staff was, what would a review in 3 months look like? Can we do a review of it in that period of time?
No, I'm not clear what we'd be reviewing because it's only 3 months.
We'll try and leave staff out of it.
I just was more a capacity question about, do you have capacity to do that? Sorry, I worded it very poorly.
So just away from questions now to debating point. Councillor Henderson, did you have a debating point? No, I never. I'll just briefly speak to it that I support the original E because it gives us what we were asking for during that discussion, which was see how the policy rolls out. We don't wait 10 years like we have done with these policies. We ensure that it's doing what we hoped it would. By that point, we've had budgets in place to start hopefully increasing the number of purchases, but I will be voting against this amendment, as Councillor Ferry has also said that within a 3-month period, there's nothing that we could review at that point. Councillor Dalton?
Thank you, yes. Probably the same. Actually, it was the Deputy Mayor asked a really valid question as well. And that was what would we review? So I will be voting against it. We've had 2 years working on this policy. The political working group has. Policy 2, when Albert Eden spoke, one of the issues was around the 20 square metres, which I think we've agreed is cost prohibitive for us. Within 3 months, we won't have allocated enough money to be able to even start on a review in terms of acquiring open space. So I don't think it's a value add, so I will be voting against it.
Thank you. Councillor Filipaina.
It's just for the reasons that I've heard, all I was going to say, I'm just going to shut my mouth because I support what has already been said, which is won't be supporting the amendment. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. I've been sitting here for all these hours listening to all the debate and trying to make sense of it. Listen to my learned councillor, long-term colleague beside me here who explained how this work was to pull everything together. And all I can think of when I hear all this debate and look what we're trying to pull together, you can't pull it all together. It should be separated at least in some form because there's so many variables. We're trying to make a Swiss Army knife. Does everything but good, nothing properly. So I just want to see something that puts this back out to a point where I can't support something where I don't understand it enough to cover all the possible negative consequences. And I'm more than happy to see more work put into this. And then on the other side of my thinking coin is both Councillor Lee and ex-Councillor Sandra Coney. I've listened to them at length too, especially Sandra, and I am concerned that part of the reason why I believe this can't be conflated all into one is the differences between regional parks and the other parks, our other open spaces. So that's why I've seconded the amendment, because I just want to, I think there's work to be done here yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watson.
Thanks. I won't be very long. I had my speaking chance to this substantive, but the council used to have a parks, a sport and parks and recreation committee back in the time of Len Brown, the first mayor, which was kept very busy with stuff like this, very busy. And the consequences of that was there was a far more ongoing oversight and sense of what was going on. I can remember under Councillor Penrose, for instance, who took us on a tour around every part of Auckland, and broken up into east, west, south and north, of all the sporting clubs, rugby league, soccer, the whole shooting match, to get a really good sense of how the provision was going in those particular areas. If the default position of not backing Councillor Lee's amendment here is that you wait, we wait, ones that are still here, for a full term. So it'll be 3 years to today, that your first time you come back to get any sense of review, if there's not any delay. That's a long, long time, given the doubts, the questions that were raised, in particular in respect of policy 2. So what's up there is entirely pragmatic. It gives it a sense of immediacy that will be totally missing from a 3-year gap and at best and reporting back. The end of the next term of council, that's not satisfactory for something that everyone feels is so important. We need to be over it way before 3 years' time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Darby.
Look, I think it's a good one to lead into this question, and I was of the view at the start of this item that I was probably more determined to, do more work on that policy too. I've listened to the questions that many of you have asked of our staff and heard the responses to my own questions, and I've heard the staff say, you probably couldn't get much more out of it, and I asked myself, sometimes sitting here, you can wait for the very perfect, polished outcome, but you might be waiting a long time. And I would suggest that many of the decisions we make are, 85, 90% perfect solutions. It's hard to get that last 5 and 10%. I'm going to support the original motions and not this one, though I get the intent of it. I'm satisfied that we'll get that legal oversight and polish it up another couple of percentage points, and we'll get there. But to actually not put it over the line now puts us at risk. And I'm very concerned about some immediate problems that we have to rectify. And rather than speak later, though I am speaking to just this one, this amendment, it is vitally important that we start addressing the quality of the urban spaces, the urban environments that Aucklanders are living in, outside of their new medium density housing, apartment dwellings, or single house zones. I am really concerned that we're actually not providing the open space that a good, healthy, well-functioning society requires. And Chair, I'd like, as we go back to the main motions, to look at that implementation review that I spoke to you of in the break and you'd already considered anyway, and whether 3 years is the number, or is it 2 years, or is it 18 months? We do actually have some time today with your lead to maybe say, well, maybe 3 years is a bit too long. Maybe it is 2 years, maybe it's 18 months, but I'll leave that with you and the executive staff to consider as we go back to the main motion. But with all that in mind, I can't lend support for this amendment, taking into account what I've heard and responses from the staff to the questions that we've asked, and I will be supporting the amended primary motions.
Thank you. All those in favour of the amendment by Councillor Lee? A division has been called. And this is the vote on the amendment, which would be E replacing the original E.
Thank you, councillors, members. You are voting on the amendment on the screen. Chair Hills.
No.
Haukura Member Ashby.
No.
Councillor Baker.
No.
Mayor Brown.
No.
Deputy Chair Dalton.
No.
Councillor Darby.
No.
Councillor Ferry.
No.
Councillor Filipaina.
Against.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yes.
Councillor Foley. Sorry, Councillor Foley, I couldn't hear you. You are muted. Okay, so Potter is not here. Haukura Member Hinare.
No.
Councillor Henderson.
No.
Councillor Lee.
Aye.
Councillor Leone. Councillor Newman.
For.
Councillor Sayers.
For.
Deputy Mayor Simpson. Councillor Stewart.
For.
Councillor Turner.
For.
Councillor Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
For.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
So that vote was lost 9 votes to 11.
Excuse me, Chair, it's Councillor Sayers. You hear me, Richard?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Look, just could you just ensure that I didn't hear and couldn't see the register of votes going through for the councillors who didn't put their mics on? So if those in the room could just put their microphones on when they vote, that would be helpful for us online. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor Sayers. Thank you. Right. Back to the substantive motion.
Chair, is it appropriate? I was going to ask you this before. Just where's that part of the amendment that you were working up on the implementation review? Which part is it?
It was E. It does say 3 years. That was the advice that we'd be able to measure, at that point.
E?
Could we slide down to E? Sorry, staff.
Sorry, we just need to redo the number.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Is it appropriate? I think the standing orders are ask a question.
Orders are allowed that, yes.
Megan, just in terms of the wording of E, you've heard the intent of those, we're supporting an amendment there that's lost, but thinking of those views, which are really important, in terms of the timing of the 3 years, is there merit in bringing that forward, and by what period? Could it be 1 year? Could it be 18 months?
Look, through the chair, and I am guided by you. Obviously, when you put in place a new system or a new policy or a new way of doing things, it can take a little bit of time to see whether it's working. I think 3 months, we won't have a clue whether it's working or not. In 3 months, we may have no opportunity to purchase any land, or we might have 10 opportunities. I don't know. As a general kind of rule of thumb, 3 years is often the time that you do a review of a policy. That's our advice. If you wanted to put it, say, to 2 years, I'd be okay with that. I worry that if it's too much sooner than that, we're not going to understand whether in fact it has worked at all. So up to you.
Well, I need to leave it with Councillor Filipaina and Councillor Dalton. I'm just wondering whether I'm not going to die in a ditch on this, but I'm wondering if a 2-year period really reflects a wider consensus.
Yeah.
A maximum of? Sorry, the Deputy Mayor suggested some wording which is a maximum of, or reviewed within 3 years, I think would be the way you would put that. And then that gives a little bit of wiggle room about getting some advice from staff about what would be a useful time period, what they have capacity for. They may need some budget money from us in order to be able to do this work. I assume it's unfunded at the moment. So that could be a way forward.
What about, and this is, and I'm sort of suspending status orders for the second. Can we just discuss this? So I think, in my opinion, and this would be up to Councillor Filipaina and Dalton, keeping it as 3 years to evaluate its effectiveness and outcomes for Auckland and reported to relevant committee of council, but you could put comma with a report, interim report in time for the LTP. I'm doubtful that we'll be able to see a measurable in 1.5, 2 years, but you could have an interim update of how it's processing.
Yeah, I just think it's got to be done in time to inform the long-term plan. That's my thing, because the long-term plan's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work in the Mayor's office, and I wouldn't like to be sitting out doing that, not knowing how this is going. So it has to be before the debates on the long-term plan. Otherwise, we'll be. So that I think that it's wise what you've raised there, Councillor Darby. I think it should be perhaps instead of 3 years, in time to inform the debate for the long-term plan is what we really need. We can't have a long-term plan not knowing what's this meaning. Okay.
Is that fine, councillors, mover and seconder? This is, thank you. Now, Councillor Newman, did you have a question?
Well, Chair, since you were suspending standing orders, I'm not sure what the status of this is.
No, we're back in standing orders. I was just trying to say to people that me trying to change the
Okay, well,
out of order.
all right. Look. My issue with the time frame is that ultimately, I think that the development contributions policy needs to be updated, and it can be updated every year if we need to give effect to something, so that we can start to acquire contributions for purchase of land. Then you would do that on an annualized basis. So that, I have some sympathy for something well before 3 years, to be honest. I was going to suggest a year, but there needs to be something other than this. We will roll back around, and I can tell you what we have achieved potentially in for the next time we do this in 3 years, not very much. So the key thing for me that's missing is an implementation plan to fund it. And DCs needs to be part of that. I'd like to go and have that conversation with my community, because it will cost them more. And so it should, if you want to get all those pocket parks in my ward.
Well, look, we've got a proposed H, Chair's Rec. It's a noting, so it's reflecting that the next policy, the DC policy review, does need to include this in some form. There is quite a lot of work, evidential work in behind, as you well know, Councillor Newman, to change that DC policy, and obviously it goes out for consultation. I'm okay with what we've worded here, but it may not go as far as you want, or we can continue to talk about it, kind of outside the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Newman.
Well, Chair, look, I mean, an amendment has been put and lost, so that's that. But look, a lot more needs to be done in quite a short time to give effect to something if we're going to turn green dots on a map into something that happens. I don't need everything to be perfect, but we do need to put something in a schedule and to start to charge for it.
Thank you. Yes, and I think we will move as quickly as possible in approving this. Obviously helps move that forward. The last speaker on this item, unless Councillor Alf would like a reply, Councillor Dalton. Oh, go Councillor Walker.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker, did you want to speak? Yep, Councillor Walker.
Oh, Walker first.
So I want to agree with what Daniel said just a moment ago. I've certainly been asking for an update on the contributions, the identification of more parks in areas where they are sadly lacking. And frankly, if this doesn't cover that off, then it just goes nowhere. It's more talk. The concern that I have when I look around Auckland and I look at the greenfield areas and take Milldale, for example, there's no playing fields. There's nowhere for football, rugby, league, netball, cricket. Scouts, Girl Guides, even churches, community halls, nothing. That is what is happening in these greenfield areas. And in the brownfield areas, we are trading off the existing provision of reserves. We're not adding scarcely anything, because in the brownfield areas, the cost of buying a property and knocking a house down is too prohibitive. And then the other structural problem that we've got, that I've asked to get a report on, is because in most locations you've got to make a provision for reserve space for existing as well as additional people coming in that attract the development contributions. Because anything for existing people has to be funded by debt, and because we're at our debt ceiling, we actually choose not to put any reserves in place. So our circumstance is getting worse rapidly. If, on the other hand, we do put some reserve in and we have to buy it, it's reflected in our mounting debt. And part of the reason that we have millions of dollars, billions of dollars in additional debt is because our development contributions are not appropriate. So I have a real concern that these structural issues should have been faced some time ago. We continue to kick the can down the road, and I don't know what I have to do to try and get some support to have this addressed. So on that basis, I'll be voting against this because it's still not delivering. Thank you. And as it stands, there's no information around the unfunded mandate, which is significant.
Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just put my my camera on working. Yeah, thank you. Look, I want to speak in favour of this motion. I think it's I voted in favour of the amendment because I wanted to put some pressure on, and in terms of the time frame, I was hoping this amendment might have been put forward a little bit earlier. So yeah, totally supportive of it, particularly in terms of timing, in terms of the long-term plan. So to make sure it's not unfunded mandate or policy, that it is funded, and just to make my colleagues aware, and I'm aware of a situation right now that's sitting on officers' desks of a family in Martins Bay, which is an area up in Rodney, that wishes to basically gift or very favourably sell a large piece of land for Moore Regional Park. And I think the officers are just in a very difficult place about, their ability to accept that offer, which you'd never get in a lifetime again. So I think the more we could perhaps differentiate the different budgets for the different requirements, that would be helpful. And I would, Megan, I just probably trying to signal there if in the interim report if there's something that could be along those lines, and listening to the other debate today. So I'll be voting in favour, Chair. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. I can't believe how long we've spent on this item, but I think I'm really pleased with the set of resolutions we've got to, and thank you to the Chair for shepherding us through this. The point I just wanted to make, I guess, in supporting this is that where we have gone over the course of the last 5.5 hours is we've gone from concerns that it wasn't ambitious enough in terms of wanting 20 metres squared or other similar accommodations, to people being concerned now that it's too expensive, and therefore we're providing too much open space. So I guess on the basis that if something is both too expensive and not expensive enough at the same time, it might be reaching a happy medium, then sounds like we've landed it. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor. Just briefly, there has been a huge amount of work. I want to thank everyone who has done that. Speaking to reducing those 5 policies, we all supported that in December unanimously to reduce it down to these 2 packages. The thing was, we've been hearing from our communities for a long time that high density does not provide the open space we need because of our policies, and we needed a capacity-focused policy to provide more open space than we currently do in high and medium density areas where residents have low levels of provision. I have obviously worked on this a long time. There is a significant amount to be done. As Councillor Walker says, we actually have a DC update underway right now, and it's come to us maybe 5-6 times. That goes up for consultation, that funds certain things, but that's where we have to add this in. And I do hope the next council backs this policy and adds significant budget to the open space and regional park policies, because that's where this lands. But I think, we must say that this had very strong support through consultation. Local boards are majority in support, but also for those who didn't, the staff have changed this significantly with the working group to try and accommodate those things. I hope we can all support this today. Councillor Dalton.
Thank you very much. And also thanks to Councillor Filipaina, who took on the leadership for a couple of years. This work has been significant, and I know how many workshops, we've had, but also Carol and your team, honestly, the communications you've had to have with iwi, with local boards, with other departments, everyone that was impacted, because when you bring 5 strategies, policies, plans together into one, which is a clear direction from this governing body, there are too many strategies, too many policies. How can we reduce them? And you've done this. You've taken 5 and put it into one. So it's going to be complex, but an amazing job. And your resilience today to answer those questions just goes to show how much you are embedded, that policy is embedded in you. Those questions and the answers that you gave were really thorough. I think it would be helpful for us at some point, and maybe you want to do it next term, a robust discussion around unfunded mandates and strategy. You know, a strategy that is giving us direction and decision making so we're not scattergun all over the place, compared to what an unfunded mandate is. We've got to get that balance and understanding right so it becomes less of a political conversation and more of a practical implementation of how we do our work here at Council as the governing body setting direction. I've got a couple of examples from within my ward, and one of them is a greenfields development, and it's called the Waimahia Inlet. And under the current policy, it was really, really difficult to get pocket parks. We got them, and you can see the inlet on Google Maps. Young families, in the most part, high density or medium density housing, but they got their pocket parks, and it's so good for the kids. And the housing design, so whoever is cooking dinner can look out the window at the kids in the pocket parks, and it's a good way to live for people with young families, but we did need the provision. And what this policy is going to do is enable things like that to happen. This policy is enabling more land, more parks, and the other example I have is a brownfield intensification, and the street my mum lives in is a perfect example. And I think of her as Carl Fredrickson in the movie Up, where she's that one house that's left and everything has been built up around her. No green fields, no space for these families that are coming in to live there, nowhere for the kids to run around, no room in the sections. So we do absolutely need a solution, and the policy today is going to help provide that solution. I won't take up much more time because it has been a very long time. In terms of funding it, using DCs, using debt, using rates, it's the conversation that does have to happen, of course, to implement the strategy. But remember that we need to have a strategy to start with and then work through the next steps. We were reminded yesterday by all of the local boards how we have not gone back and revisited the emergency budget cuts, those significant cuts. 50% of the open space budget was cut. We've never gone back and revisited that. And this is something that needs to happen probably in the next long-term plan. They also talked about resourcing for compliance and the other issues, service level issues that they have. So revisiting the budget is going to be a big job for you all when it comes around to the next LTP. I'll leave it there, Richard, Chair, but thank you so much to the staff that have taken so much time to go through this so diligently. And like every policy, bits will work, bits won't, and we will fix it up as we go along. So kia ora, thank you, I support this.
Kia ora, Deputy Chair, thank you. And right of reply, last speaker, Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you here, Monday, and I will be short. Just like the guy on my left. Just want to acknowledge all those who submitted, the advisory and also the Māori Rōpū. Want to acknowledge all our demographic advisory panels who also submitted. And it was interesting with the statistics that came back around that submission where there is a comment made here that there is strong support for the draft strategy overall. So I acknowledge them in regards to their support for this. Also, 16 local boards supporting all or most aspects. I acknowledge the local boards. Lastly, it's around the next steps, and it's the implementation, but I just wanted to read, I know you've all read it, but it's got, if adopted, implementation will be guided by new strategic directions, investment principles and policies. Staff, thank you so much. Work well done over the 2 years, but it's only the beginning. The work is going to start, and I will be closing this debate with that comment. Kilda.
Right, all those in favour?
Division.
Division, okay. Go through a division.
Thank you. Members, you're voting on the original motion, which has been on your screen. Chair Hills.
Finally, in favour?
Hokura Member Ashby.
Aye.
Councillor Baker.
For.
Mayor Brown.
He said, didn't have his microphone on, but he said yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, and just a reminder, the request to have your microphone on when you're voting, please. Deputy Chair Dalton.
Aye.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Ferry.
For.
Councillor Filipina.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yes.
Councillor Foley.
For.
Hokura Member Hinare.
Yeah.
Councillor Henderson.
Yes.
Councillor Lee. Councillor Leone.
For.
Councillor Newman.
Yes.
Councillor Sayers.
For.
Deputy Mayor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Stewart. Councillor Turner.
Against.
Councillor Walker.
Yes, but can you record my vote against?
You'll have to turn on your microphone, please, Councillor Walker.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. I'll vote yes, but record my vote against E.
Yeah, same as me.
Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Yes, report against E.
Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, I'll do the same as those two.
Right, thank you. That's 20 votes to 2. We will have a 5-minute break.